The tray hit the floor before anyone in the room fully processed that it was going to. 1 second, Tonia Bassi was moving through the sitting room the way she always moved, precise, controlled. The next second, Sharon's hand had connected with the edge of the tray, and everything on it was on the floor between them. Sharon looked down at it, then up at Tonia. The smile on her face was small and deliberate and had been waiting for exactly this moment. Clean that up. She turned to walk away. Tonia's hand caught her arm. Not hard, not aggressive, just final. The grip of a woman who had decided this moment was not ending on someone else's terms. Sharon froze, looked down at the hand on her arm with the particular disbelief of someone who had never once in her life been physically stopped by a person they considered beneath them. The disbelief of someone who had miscalculated. Tonia turned her back around slowly. She looked at her. The way you look at something you are deciding how seriously to take and have already decided. You deliberately knocked that tray to the floor, Tonia said. Quietly. Quiet. Final. In front of everyone. And you smiled about it. How dare you put your hands? I'm still talking. The room went completely still. Woo Jung-suk sat with her teacup suspended halfway to her mouth. The visiting associate had stopped reaching for his napkin. The air in the room had changed register entirely, the way air changes when something is happening that cannot be undone. You stood there, Tonia continued, waiting for me to shrink. Her voice didn't rise. Not even slightly. Not by a fraction. I don't shrink. She released Sharon's arm. Looked around the room. Every face. Every eye. Let the silence do what silence does when a woman who means every word she has just said refuses to fill it with anything softer. Then she looked back at Sharon one final time. Clean it up yourself. And she walked. At the door, Seo-jun. Standing there. Arms loose at his sides. She hadn't known he was there. He had been there long enough. Their eyes met for 1 second as she passed. He said nothing, but the corner of his mouth moved. Small. Involuntary. She walked through. He watched the door after she was gone. The smile stayed longer than he intended. Before we go any further, she didn't shrink. Not for a single second. But here is what nobody in that room knew yet, including her. The man standing at that door had been watching her for 2 years. And what he just saw confirmed everything he already felt. Stay with me until the end. This one is going to be worth it. Hit like and subscribe if you love stories where the right woman always wins. Seo-jun had been 20 minutes from the estate when his phone rang. He took the call through the car speaker, a figure, a decision, 2 sentences done. By the time he pulled through the gates, the matter was already handled, and he was already thinking about something else. A member of his household staff was waiting at the entrance with a document that needed his attention. He took it walking, read it in 4 steps, handed it back with 1 quiet instruction, and kept moving toward the house. He was in the kitchen doorway, jacket still on, the day still on him, when he heard his grandmother's voice from the sitting room. He stopped. He listened. And then he stayed exactly where he was. Tonia Bassi had come to the Woo estate 2 years ago, and she had not stumbled into it. Seo-jun had found her at a private dinner she catered for a business associate on an evening he had almost not attended, in a kitchen he had no particular reason to walk into at the end of the night. He had eaten in silence through the entire meal. He barely spoke. He was focused on the food. When the last course was cleared, he had found her in the kitchen breaking down her station. She was working with the focused efficiency of someone who treated the end of a job with the same care as the beginning. She cleaned with the same precision she cooked. Seo-jun had stood in the doorway and asked if she took private contracts. Tonia had looked at him the way she looked at everything. Measuring. Unhurried. Like she was deciding whether he was worth the answer. Depends on the client, she said. What does it depend on? Whether they respect the work. He thought about that answer for days. Bassi Private Dining had 6 staff, a waiting list that moved slowly because she was selective about who got on it, and a reputation that arrived in rooms before she did. She came to the Woo estate 3 days a week. She cooked. She left. That was the arrangement. Clean. Professional. Defined. What started as a contract had become something else. Late nights. Conversations that went too far. A line neither of them crossed, but both of them saw. Until that waiting was interrupted. They both knew it. They were simply waiting for something to make the next step feel like the right moment. What neither of them had anticipated was that something would arrive from Korea with 2 suitcases and a plan. Woo Jung-suk had arrived the afternoon before all of this. Seo-jun had mentioned it to Tonya the morning before, not as a warning, just information. His grandmother was coming. 2 weeks. He said it the way he said most things. Directly, without excess. Tonya had asked if there was anything she didn't eat. He had looked at her for a moment before answering. The particular look of a man choosing his words carefully, not because he was uncertain, but because he wanted to be precise. She doesn't eat anything she doesn't recognize, he said. Tonya understood immediately that it had nothing to do with food. Jung-suk came through the front door with Yoon Charan beside her and 2 assistants behind her carrying luggage, and she moved through the house with the complete authority of a woman who had sacrificed enough for this family to consider every room of it partly hers. She greeted her grandson with genuine warmth, cupped his face in both hands, said something in Korean that made him respond with the particular tenderness reserved for people you love and find complicated in equal measure. Then she looked around the house slowly. The assessing eye of someone taking inventory of something they feel responsible for. Charan stood slightly behind her. Polished. Elegant. Perfectly composed. That evening Jung-suk told Seo-jun that Charan would cook dinner. She has been learning, Jung-suk said. Traditional recipes. Her mother's. Seo-jun said nothing. But something in his expression said everything that needed saying. Tonya arrived the next morning through the kitchen entrance the way she always did. Set her bags down. Opened the refrigerator. Began the familiar ritual of assessing what was available and what needed ordering for the week ahead. Then she stopped. Someone had been in her kitchen. She could tell from small things a pan returned to a slightly wrong position, her knife block rearranged by someone who didn't know her system, a residue on the stovetop that wasn't hers. Someone had cooked here last night and had tried carefully to put everything back correctly and had almost succeeded. She stood there for a moment. Read the room the way she read everything. Then she set her bag down and got to work. She cooked lunch. Precise and excellent as always, the standard she brought to every meal regardless of what was happening around it. She brought it through to the dining room where Jung-suk sat with Charan and Seo-jun. This looks wonderful, Charan said warmly. What is it? Tonya told her. Interesting. Jung-suk didn't look at Tonya when she said it. She looked at Seo-jun. Charan made something similar last night. Her mother's recipe. A small pause. Homemade always carries more heart. Don't you think so? Tonya set down the last dish. Enjoy your lunch, she said pleasantly. She went back to her kitchen. Later Seo-jun came through in the late afternoon. He leaned against the counter the way he had been doing for months. She kept working. For a moment nothing between them was any different from what it had always been, and both of them felt that, the particular comfort of a rhythm that had been built over time. She's going to make this difficult, he said. She already has, Tonya said. Not unkindly. Just accurately. I'll handle it. Handle it soon, she said. I have other clients. He looked at her. She didn't look back. But the corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. The private language of 2 people who have developed one without deciding to. Charan was never obvious. That was what made her effective. She appeared in the kitchen asking questions about technique, innocent on the surface, designed underneath to position Tonya as an employee and herself as a student of something more refined. She sat at the counter making warm conversation that felt like friendliness and functioned like an assessment. You must really love cooking, Charan said one afternoon. To do it as a job. Every day. For other people. I do, Tonya said. I cook because it feels like love, Charan said. Not obligation. My grandmother says you can always taste the difference. You can taste the difference between good technique and poor technique, Tonya said pleasantly. Everything else is poetry. Charan smiled. Her eyes didn't. At dinner that evening Jung-suk watched her grandson. Specifically, she watched where his eyes went when Tonya moved between the kitchen and the dining room. She watched it once. Twice. A third time. She had seen enough. The next morning, she asked Seojun to sit with her privately over tea. Chaerin is a good woman, she began. Halmoni, let me finish. She set her cup down with the quiet precision of a woman who expected to be heard when she spoke. She is from a good family. She understands our world. She would bring something to this house that belongs here. The silence between them stretched. I hear you, Seojun said finally. He stood, kissed her forehead, left the room without another word. Jung-suk sat alone with her tea and understood for the first time that her grandson had already made a decision she had not been consulted on. The particular stillness of a woman recalibrating. She changed her approach. Now came the day of the visiting associate. The sitting room was prepared. Tea was ready. Everything in its right place. Tonia came through with the tray the way she always came through, moving efficiently through a space she knew completely at home in what she did. Jung-suk turned to the associate mid-conversation and gestured toward her. And this is the help. Tonia stopped walking. She turned slowly, looked at Jung-suk, then at the associate, then back at Jung-suk. She gave each of them the full measure of her attention, unhurried, deliberate. I'm sorry. Completely calm. Could you say that again? The room shifted. Jung-suk held her gaze. Said nothing. They both understood what had been said and what was not going to be unsaid. Chaerin stepped forward from the settee. That warm practiced smile, the one that had been calibrated for exactly this kind of moment. She just means you work here. A small pleasant laugh. You're here to serve. Isn't that right? Tonia looked at her. I run my own business, Tonia said quietly. I choose my clients. I came to this house because I chose to. She looked at Jung-suk directly. Not because I am anyone's help. Jung-suk held her gaze for a moment, then turned back to the associate and continued her conversation as though nothing significant had occurred. That was when Chaerin's hand moved. She reached out and tipped the tray. Everything hit the floor. She looked down at it, then back up at Tonia with the particular smile of someone who has just done something they planned to do and found it satisfying. Clean that up. She turned to walk away. Tonia's hand caught her arm. The rest happened the way it happened, the words, the silence, the room holding its breath, Chaerin's chin lifting with how dare you and Tonia's voice not rising once, not by a fraction. Delivering everything she needed to deliver with the particular composure of a woman who has never needed volume to be heard. Clean it up yourself. And she walked to the door where Seojun was standing, and their eyes met for 1 second, and he said nothing, and the corner of his mouth moved, and she was gone, and the smile stayed on his face longer than he intended. Jung-suk came to the kitchen 3 days later. Sat down at the table, her first time in Tonia's space, and delivered her assessment with the directness of a woman who had decided honesty would serve her strategy better than subtlety had. You're very good at what you do, she said. Thank you, Tonia said. My grandson values excellence. That is why you have been here 2 years. A pause. But this house needs more than excellence in a kitchen. Tonia stopped what she was doing, turned to face her fully. Mrs. Wu, with respect, I think you may be having a conversation with me that you should be having with your grandson. I am having it with you because you are smart enough to understand what I am saying. I understand exactly what you are saying, Tonia said. I just disagree with your right to say it. Jung-suk studied her. Something moved in her expression, not anger. Reassessment. The recalibration of a woman who had underestimated what she was dealing with. She stood. Think about what I have said. I think about everything, Tonia said. It's how I run my business. Jung-suk left. For the first time since she had arrived, she was not entirely certain she was winning. The second humiliation came at the family dinner 3 days later. Seojun had invited 2 of his father's oldest friends, men who had known the family for decades, who carried real weight in its history. The older of the 2 deferred to Seojun in the quiet, particular way of a man who has seen a great deal and does not defer easily, waiting for Seojun's red before offering his own, asking his opinion before sharing his. The dynamic between them communicated without announcement exactly who Seojun was in the world outside this house. It was a significant evening. Tonia had spent the entire day on it. Every course. Every detail. The kind of preparation that doesn't show because it has been done so well it simply looks like excellence arrived naturally. She brought the first course herself. One of the older men looked up with genuine appreciation. This is extraordinary. Who prepared this? Before Tonya could respond, Jung-suk said smoothly, Chaerin helped with the preparation this evening. She has such a gift. The table turned warmly toward Chaerin. I only helped a little, Chaerin said modestly. She is too humble, Jung-suk said. Tonya stood at the edge of the table. She had prepared every single thing on it. Chaerin had not entered the kitchen once that entire day. She looked at Seo-jun across the table. He was already looking at her. His expression said, I see it. Every single thing that is happening right now, I see it completely. She gave him the smallest nod. Not here. Not tonight. Not in front of these men. She went back to the kitchen. Stood at her counter in the quiet of it. Breathed. Then she picked up her phone and sent a message to her assistant. Check availability for a new contract consultation next week. She was not making a decision yet, but she was preparing to have the option. Seo-jun came to the kitchen before the dessert course. Closed the door behind him. Said nothing for a moment, just looked at her with the particular look that had stopped being professional a long time ago, and they both knew it. That was wrong, he said. Yes, she said simply. I should have said something at the table. You couldn't, Tonya said. Not in front of those men. It would have made everything worse. She looked at him directly. But you need to say something now. Tonight. To her directly. I'm going to. Tonight, she said. Not a request. He held her gaze. Tonight. Seo-jun found his grandmother in the sitting room after the guests had left. Chaerin had excused herself upstairs. The house was quiet in the particular way of a house that has just emptied after a long evening. He sat across from Jung-suk the way he had sat across from her his entire life, with complete respect and complete fearlessness. Two things she had taught him simultaneously without meaning to teach either of them separately. What happened at dinner tonight cannot happen again, he said. I don't know what you. Halmoni. Quiet. Final. Tonya prepared everything on that table today. Every single dish. And you gave that credit to someone else in front of people who matter to this family. A pause. That was dishonest. And it was unkind. And it will not happen again in my house. Jung-suk was quiet for a long time. I am trying to protect you, she said. I know, Seo-jun said. I know that is what you believe you are doing. He leaned forward slightly. But I need you to hear me clearly. Tonya is not a problem I need protecting from. She matters to me. In a way I am not willing to negotiate with anyone. A long silence. Longer than the ones before it. You love her, Jung-suk said. Not a question. Just the old woman finally saying the thing she had been circling for 2 weeks, saying it plainly because she was too honest a woman to keep pretending she hadn't seen it. Seo-jun looked at his grandmother without looking away. Yes, he said. Chaerin had heard everything. She stood by the hallway, and it turned out she didn't excuse herself after all. The next morning, Chaerin came downstairs with her bags already packed. Not dramatically. Not with tears. With the particular quiet dignity of a woman who knows how to read a room and had simply read this one correctly too late to change the outcome. She found Jung-suk at breakfast. I think it's time for me to go home, she said. Something moved in Jung-suk's face. Chaerin. It's all right. And she meant it, or was close enough to mean it that the distance didn't matter. I think I always knew. She paused at the doorway. He never looked at me the way he looks at her. She left that morning. The house felt different without her. Lighter. Like something that had been held at the wrong angle for weeks had finally been set down flat. Jung-suk came to the kitchen alone that evening. Tonya was in the middle of prep, knife and board, and the particular focused quiet she brought to everything she made. She heard the door. Looked up. Saw Jung-suk standing there. Did not stop working. Jung-suk sat down at the kitchen table. She had sat there once before as a strategy. This time was different, and they both felt the difference immediately. For a while she just watched Tonya work. The efficiency of it. The care underneath the efficiency. You cook like someone who means every bite, she said finally. I do, Tonya said. A silence that was different from the ones they had shared before. Less armored. His mother cooked like that, Jung-suk said. Her voice was quieter now. The authority still present, but something underneath it that was older and more tired and more honest than anything she had brought into this house with her. Like every meal was worth the effort. Like the people sitting down to eat it were worth it too. Tonya said nothing. She kept working. But she was completely present, the way she was present to everything that mattered. He stopped eating properly after she died, Jung-suk continued. For almost a year. Food became something he got through. He went through the motions of it. She paused. The first time I saw him eat the way he used to, with presence, with actual enjoyment, was after he hired you. The kitchen was very quiet. I didn't know that, Tonya said softly. No, you wouldn't. Jung-suk looked at her hands flat on the table. I came here because I love him. Because I have spent my whole life trying to protect what is left of this family. She exhaled slowly, the long exhale of someone setting something down they have been carrying too long. I went about it badly. Tonya set down her knife. Turned to face her fully. Yes, she said. You did. No softening. No politeness placed carefully over the truth. Just the truth, offered cleanly, the way Tonya offered everything. Jung-suk looked up at her. And something in the old woman's face, something in her expression changed. You really are not afraid of me, she said. Should I be? Tonya asked. Jung-suk looked at her for a long moment. Then small, real, entirely unplanned, the kind of smile that bypasses everything a person has decided about themselves, she smiled. My grandson, she said quietly, has better taste than I gave him credit for. That evening was the first dinner since Charan had left that felt like what dinners at this house used to feel like. Before the visit. Before all that wait. Jung-suk ate with attention. Slowly. The way you eat when you are actually tasting something rather than enduring it. She set her fork down after the first course and looked toward the kitchen for a long moment. Then she looked at her grandson. Tell her, she said, that this is the best thing I have eaten since I arrived. Seojun looked at his grandmother. Something in his face settled, the particular settling of a man who has fought for something and can finally feel the ground under it. Then he got up. He found Tonya in the kitchen the way he always found her, in the middle of something, focused, entirely present. He leaned against the counter like he always did. My grandmother says this is the best thing she has eaten since she arrived, he said. Tonya looked up. Something moved in her expression, surprise, and underneath the surprise something warmer. She said that. Exactly that. She looked back down at what she was doing. But the corner of her mouth moved. He watched her for a moment. Then he pushed off the counter and came to stand beside her at the worktop. Closer than he usually stood, the particular closeness of two people who have stopped pretending the distance between them is anything other than what it is. She didn't move away. Tonya. She looked up at him. I don't want you here as my chef, he said quietly. She held his gaze. The direct, steady gaze that had stopped him in someone else's kitchen 2 years ago and had never quite let him go since. Then what do you want? She asked. He looked at her, unhurried, certain, the way he looked at everything he had already decided about. Everything else, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached past him for a spoon, close enough that the distance between them was almost nothing, and tasted what was on the stove. Set the spoon down. Considered. You should know, she said, that I am not easy. I know, he said. I don't compromise on the things that matter to me. I know that too. And I will never, she said, looking at him, be anyone's help. He looked at her, certain. You are, he said, the most capable person I have ever met. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled. Slow and real and entirely hers. Good answer, she said. He smiled back. And in the sitting room, Jung-suk sat with her tea and listened to the quiet coming from her grandson's kitchen. For the first time, she let it be enough. Perhaps she had found something. Something she had not known to look for. She picked up her cup, drank her tea, and let it be enough. If you made it this far, you already know. Tonya Bassi did not come to that house to be anyone's help. She came to do what she does best. And she left with something none of them saw coming. If you made it this far, then you saw it clearly. She didn't fight for respect. She didn't beg for it. She didn't even ask for it. She simply refused to be treated like anything less. And in the end, the entire house adjusted to her. But tell me the truth. Did Tonya handle that the right way, or would you have done something differently? Like the video and subscribe because the next story, you definitely don't want to miss it. Thank you for watching.